On a crisp autumn afternoon in City's Central Park shimmered in shades of gold and amber. Joggers passed by, children laughed in the distance, and the faint scent of roasted chestnuts drifted through the air. On a bench near the famous fountain, an old man sat quietly, feeding crumbs of bread to pigeons. His coat was a little too big for his thin frame. His eyes carried both storms and sunlight. And his hands, scarred but steady, trembled slightly. His name was Jonathan Hale, a retired teacher, grandfather, and a man who had survived one of the most brutal wars of the 20th century. But Jonathan carried a secret that almost no one knew. The man who once tried to take his life was now his closest friend. It was 1972. Jonathan was 23. Serving as a medic in the Vietnam War, he had no illusions about heroism. He wasn't there to kill. He was there to save lives. The jungle was alive with danger. The heat was suffocating, the air thick with tension, and every rustle of leaves could mean life or death. On one mission, Jonathan's unit was ambushed. Gunfire erupted, chaos swallowed the scene, and Jonathan was separated from his team. As he crawled through the thick undergrowth, trying to reach the wounded, a sharp crack echoed and pain exploded in his shoulder. He fell, gasping, as blood soaked his uniform. When he looked up, through the haze of pain, he saw the enemy soldier, a young man barely older than him, standing over him with a rifle. Jonathan thought it was the end. The soldier's face was hard, but his eyes flickered with something: hesitation. He could have pulled the trigger and ended Jonathan's life in that instant. Instead, he lowered the rifle slightly. In broken English, he whispered, "Go, before others come." Jonathan, stunned and bleeding, managed to stumble into the cover of the trees. That day, an enemy had spared him. Jonathan returned home with scars, both visible and invisible. He became a history teacher, married his college sweetheart, and had 2 children. He taught his students not just dates and battles, but the cost of hate and the value of humanity. Decades passed. The memory of that soldier never left him. He often wondered if the man survived, if he ever thought of that moment in the jungle. One rainy afternoon in 2005, Jonathan ducked into a small coffee shop in Manhattan to escape the downpour. At a corner table, an elderly Asian man sat reading a book. When the man glanced up, their eyes met, and Jonathan felt his breath catch. The scar along the man's jawline, the shape of his eyes, the way he held his hands. Jonathan knew it was him. Jonathan approached slowly. "Excuse me, were you in Vietnam?" The man froze. Then, in a voice tinged with surprise, he said, "Yes, a long time ago." They sat together, and the man introduced himself as Nguyen Bao. After a pause, Nguyen said softly, "I know you. You were the medic in the jungle. I didn't shoot." Over coffee, they spoke for hours. Nguyen told his story. He had been drafted at 18, had lost 2 brothers in the war, and had never stopped seeing the medic he spared in his dreams. Jonathan shared his life after the war, his family, his career. They realized they had both carried the same invisible wound, the haunting question of why that moment had happened. They began meeting regularly, to men from opposite sides of a war, now sitting side by side, sharing stories about grandchildren and favorite recipes. In 2010, Nguyen's daughter was diagnosed with a rare illness. The treatment was expensive, and insurance wouldn't cover it fully. When Jonathan found out, he quietly sold a vintage coin collection, his most prized possession, and gave the money to Nguyen. "Your kindness saved my life," Jonathan told him. "Now let me help save hers." Nguyen wept openly. That moment was not about debt, not about evening a score. It was pure humanity. Years later, their story made the local news. Cameras captured them laughing together in Central Park. Reporters called it the friendship that defied war. When asked why he had spared Jonathan back then, Nguyen replied, "My brother had been killed the week before. I hated everyone in a different uniform. But that day, when I saw his eyes, I didn't see an enemy. I saw a man." and I chose kindness. Jonathan and Nguyen continued to meet every week until Nguyen passed away in 2018. At his funeral, Jonathan spoke. "He spared me in war. We both spared each other in life, from hate, from bitterness, from the belief that enemies can't be friends." And every autumn, Jonathan still sits on that same park bench, feeding pigeons. Sometimes strangers ask why he smiles to himself. He always answers the same way. "I'm thinking about the day my enemy became my brother."